So just before we write ePotter's response, I'm going to give that space that we've been given between each question and response. So I'm going to put system.out.println, open brackets, and then semicolon. And then after that, we're going to move on to now providing the response that ePotter will say. And he's just going to say, I can imagine what it's like being whatever age they've entered. So we're going to go with system.out.println, okay? And then ePotter is going to say, I can imagine. You can put another response if you'd like at this point. Really, it's just to get it more conversational. So something that could respond back to what the user has entered, which is basically their name and their age. And so I'm just going to say, I can imagine what it is like being, and then I'm just going to call, the variable for storing age, and I'll just say plus. Remember what we've done before. So the plus means concatenation, and that just means joining whatever you have here as a string or as a text that's going to be printed with whatever age the user is going to enter. And you realize I'm giving a space so that there's a space between this last word and the age when it's printed out on the screen. And then I'll put a semicolon, and then I'll just basically paste off this line of hyphens that I've had, just to again indicate this is where the last statement would end for the two questions that were asked. And then I'll start a new question here. And so the next question, to keep this conversation going with the user, ePotter would ask, what is your favorite food? So I'm going to write it as well. What is your favorite food? So what is your favorite food? And then I would, of course, put a question mark, and then, of course, close this with a semicolon. And then after, we will declare a variable of a string type, of course, because we know string data types are used to receive text-like information. And we're going to call this variable food. And that's equal to, of course, we're using the object scanner object called objects, because that's what we're using to receive text input. And we're going to say dot next line, or you can say dot next and close this with a semicolon. So we're asking the user for their favorite food. And, ePotter would say something like, so I'm going to paste this, again, hyphens. You don't have to have these hyphens if you feel they're annoying or you don't want them. You cannot include them. So it's not something that's obligational. It's just something I like to do whenever I have these separations going on. There is one more thing I forgot to do actually, which is to put the spacing between when ePotter says, I can imagine what it's like being whatever age that the user enters. So we were always putting in the space. So I'm just going to add that extra space so that we have an extra space before the next question's asked. So please put this extra space in between where ePotter says, I can imagine what's like being whatever age the user entered. Don't forget to close with a semicolon. And then you put an extra space and then ask the next question, what is your favorite food? And then we are going to now, after asking this question, ePotter would respond saying, whatever favorite food they entered sounds interesting, something like that. So we're going to go with the system.out and then .println, and basically just open parenthesis, and we're going to write down the variable that's storing the food that the user enters, and we'll put this concatenation sign, which is the join sign, and then we'll just basically put a space and say sounds interesting. So what we're trying to say here is whatever the user enters, then if the user enters favorite food is pasta, then it's just going to say pasta sounds interesting. So that's just going to make it, again, more conversational in that sense. So the next thing we're going to ask the user is maybe where they like to travel, or do they travel, or where have you traveled? What has been your favorite travel destination? What is the best place you would like to visit, or what's your favorite country? Something of that sort we can ask the user. So we can say, what was the favorite? Maybe we don't say what was your favorite country you visited, because maybe this user, we don't know for all users, maybe this person has not traveled. But we're going to ask the question. It's better to ask the question instead and say, do you like to travel? And then regardless of what they say, yes or no, we're just going to make a comment saying you should visit, for example, Morocco one day. So that is a general comment that relates to whether they respond yes or no to the question of, do you like to travel? So I'm going to go with system.out.println. And the question is, do you like to travel? And so we're just going to ask the user this question regardless of what they say. We're going to give them a general response. And the general response would be something like, one day you should visit Morocco. Or we can say, okay, you should visit Morocco one day. So something of that sort. We're going to be declaring a variable that's going to be storing user response to the question of do you travel? And so we're going to have the data type as string as usual, because they're going to give a text-like information as input. So string, and then I'm just going to call it travel, and that's equal to the correct scanner object, which is called object.nextLine. And then ePotter is going to be responding back with the general comment saying, okay, you should visit Morocco one day. Or you can put anything you want here, guys. Really, it's just something that has to be a general comment. So regardless of if they say yes, they travel, or no, they don't. So system.out.println, and then, ePotter is just going to say, for me, I'm going to write, okay, you should visit Morocco one day. You should visit Morocco one day, and then I'll just put an exclamation sign and close this with a semicolon. Again, remember that we want to give a spacing, sort of like a next line spacing, like we've done with all our other questions between statements and between questions. So we've asked the question of, do you like to travel? And what I would like to do, again, that I forgot to do, is please, after this question of do you like to travel, hit an enter where you gave the user the opportunity to enter their, put in their input. And let's just print an empty spacing, so we have spacing between the question and what ePotter would say. So once we've done that, I'm just going to come hit enter, and I'm going to paste this, again, lines of hyphens that I've included here. You don't have to do this. And the next thing that's going to happen after ePotter says, okay, you should visit Morocco one day, we're going to be asking them something about their hobby. And that's kind of going to be one of the very last questions. So we'll ask like a couple more questions, maybe 2 more, and then we'll tell them a joke. And then ePotter would say something like, oh, I have to run now. It was nice talking to you. And that would be pretty much how we end the program. So I'm going to go with the next question, and it's going to be about hobby. So system.out.println, again, so we can print this question on the screen. And it's just going to say, what is your hobby, or what is the one thing you like to do? So I'm just going to ask it in this manner. What is the one thing you like to do? And I'll put a question mark and close this with a semicolon. And then again, declare a variable, and I'll call this variable hobby. And that's going to be equal to object.nextLine, and close this with circular brackets and put a semicolon. And so now we've received the hobby, and I'm going to paste again, okay, this lines of hyphens, and I'm going to give a line space between this question and what ePotter is going to say after they enter their hobby. ePotter would say something like, great hobby. And then ePotter could say something, my hobby is my hobby is cooking, or ePotter could also say, one thing I like to do is cooking. So I can now print out another statement, and that's going to be ePotter's response. So println, open parenthesis, and ePotter will say something as great hobby, responding back to the user based on what they entered. And he will now say, the one thing I like to do is cooking. So I like to do is cooking. And then we close this with a semicolon and hit enter. Now the next question, which would be somewhat towards the end, is going to be for, asking them if they like to read. That's kind of the question that I just, get from the top of my head right now. But if you want to add any other question, go ahead. If you want to print out a joke right now, that's also part of the instruction. Go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to add this last question. So I pasted again my line of hyphens. As you can see, I just did that on line 35. And now line 36, I'm just going to go again with the question, asking them if they're avid readers. So I'm going to go with quotation marks and say, are you an avid reader? And, put a question mark, and I'll put a semicolon at the end, and then hit enter, and then declare a variable again, guys, that will store the user's input. And I'll call this variable reader, and it's just going to be equal to the object, again, the scanner object called object.nextLine, circular brackets, and a semicolon. And that's going to receive the input from the user, and then I'll just paste this random line of hyphens that I have here, and then I'll move on to providing the response that ePotter is going to be responding back with, and it's just going to be something like, I love to read books when I get the chance. I love to read books. You can put any response you like. I love to read books when I get the chance. You can even be more specific and say, I love to read history and culture books when I get the chance. So this is going to be ePotter's response back to the user. And then we're going to come down, and we're getting to the very last part. Now we're going to ask the user and say, hey, here's a joke. Maybe not ask the user, but just tell the user and say, do you know how bee parents send their little bees to school? They use the school bus. So that's kind of what we're going to do to end the program. So I'm just going to continue with a system.out.print. Since the instruction did say we need to include jokes in here to get the user laughing. So we're going to do something like, hey, and we'll give a space, and then we'll just basically call the user by their name. And remember that the name stored under the variable called name, username. So we're going to write, hey, and then user underscore name. So like, hey, Alicia, hey, Mark, hey, Jason, whoever it is. So hey, the person's name. And then we're just going to say, here's a joke. Here is a joke. Here's a joke. And then we'll just basically give a joke, say something that's funny, anything you can think about. And what I'm thinking to say is just, do you know how bee parents send their little bees to school? Do you know how bee parents send their little bees to school? And then, of course, after that, we're just going to say, not to schools, but to school. And then we're just going to put a question mark because we're asking. And then what's going to happen after this is I'm going to give a space. So system.out.println. So I'm going to print an empty space. And I'm just going to say something like, they send their little bees they send them to school by school bus. And so, school buzz, but actually it's school bus, but it's school bus. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll just put a quotation mark saying they send, so they send, or they go by school bus. I think that will be better. They go by school bus. Okay, so school buzz as in the B sound, but it's actually school bus. So hopefully this gets the user to laugh. If you're looking at this one, there isn't any syntax error necessarily because we've already put a concatenation sign. So we're going to run it, and if there's it, but I doubt there isn't any. So one thing about Replit is sometimes it just flags an errors like that. It's gone now. It flags errors, and it doesn't mean that you have an error, just it hasn't yet synced into the server for some reason, and that's the reason why it happens. So that's it. So we will say the joke, and then we basically just now start to end the conversation. So what's going to happen is, I forgot to put, I was actually going to print between where the joke was actually, where we asked the user or told the joke, between that and actually given the final line to the joke, I wanted to print out system.out.print an empty line space so that this last line goes to the line right after this empty line space. So if you can just put an empty line space there, that will be great. And so then it will respond by saying they go by school bus. And that's it. And then we come to the end here, and I'm just going to print again this random line of hyphens, and then we'll just tell the user, we can say ePotter will say something like, oh, I have to run now. It was nice meeting you, Alicia, Mark, or whoever the person is. Speak to you again soon, something like that. So we'll do like a final message. So system.out.print, and then I'll just put quotation marks, and then ePotter says, I have to run now, but it was nice speaking to you. But it was nice speaking to you. Again, I will like to put the name of the user. So I'll come out of the quotation marks, put the concatenation sign, which is the plus sign, and put the variable that's storing the username, which is called username. So it's going to say, it was nice speaking to you, whoever the person is going to be. And then finally, after that, we're just going to come down and give a line space. And then finally, ePotter is going to say the last statement that he wants to say, which obviously I'm just going to put as something like, speak to you again, bye, and then that's it. And we end this program. So system.out.println, and it's going to say, so ePotter is going to say, speak to you soon, again, or speak to you soon, and then just bye. So he kind of farewells with his, with the users. And finally, that will be the end, guys, of my ePotter chatbot conversation. If you want to add more questions, more statements, please feel free to go ahead. I'm just going to close our scanner objects because those are flagging. They were underlined in orange. So I'm just going to close them. So we're going to go object dot close, and then we'll just put circular bracket, semicolon, and then we'll go number dot close, and we'll also put circular bracket, semicolon. So I close the two scanner objects. It's always a good idea to close your scanner objects once you're done using them, and just take any space back up. And that's pretty much it, guys. So now we can run this program. I hope your program looks okay. You don't have any red lines anywhere. If you do, like I said, please invite me to your code and drop me a line or comment saying that you're stuck, if you're stuck somewhere, or you have an error that you really can't figure out how to fix it. But like I say, go very gently to check your lines. Make sure you've closed parentheses, semicolon, you've typed in these keywords correctly with capitals. It's really sensitive, but very important to do so. And if you're still stuck, just invite me. Here's my username, Alicia Habibi3, and I'll do my very best to respond to you as soon as possible. So now we're going to run this program, and let's see how it works. So hopefully we don't have any errors that occur. So let's see. All right, it starts with, what is your name? So I'm going to put in my name, and then it goes to, how old are you? So you can see that line that I kept putting that hyphen really just, just highlights these questions more. So here I'm going to put an age, and then it says, I can imagine what it is being like 29. It says, what's your favorite food? I'm going to put in couscous, and then it says, couscous sounds interesting. Do you like to travel? I'm going to say yes, and then you can see ePotter responds saying, okay, you should visit Morocco one day. What is the one thing you like to do? I'll just say cooking, and then ePotter says, great hobby. The one thing I like to do is cooking. Are you an avid reader? I'm going to say no, and then ePotter says, I love to read books when I get the chance. Hey, Alicia, here's a joke. Do you know how bee parents send their little bees to school? They go by school bus, and then basically just ends and say, I have to run now, but it was nice speaking to you, Alicia. Speak to you soon, and bye. So the only thing I saw was this, hey, Alicia, was too close to the here's a joke. So if you want to fix where you have, words that are joined together, which is why we keep giving spacing, just go back into your code and give that spacing right here, which is exactly on my line 40. So after it says the username, then here should be with space. And that's going to space these two words apart from each other. And you notice that the last part was really printed very fast because we didn't have a user input, and it was more printed out statements. In the upcoming lessons of this course, you will learn how to be able to give like pauses between statements so it doesn't rush and print fast immediately one after the other, but there's like a time pause. But for now, you're mostly focusing on how to use the system.out.print statements and also to receive input from the user. So I hope your program worked well. Guys, if it didn't, again, just double check. But this is the output of the ePotter chatbot. And drop me a line, like I've said again, if you have any questions. And now we're going to move on to our next part of the lesson.